In 2010, a wave of popular protests swept the Middle East, the so-called Arab Spring. In Tunisia and Egypt, these popular rebellions resulted in the ousting of long-standing dictatorships. However, in Syria, the protest movement that began in 2011 against the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad resulted in a brutal civil war that continues to this day. But what were the causes of this civil war? How has it shaped Middle Eastern and global affairs? And why has it lasted so long with no end in sight? I'm Djene.
And I'm Patrick Needham.
And you're listening to Talking History.
Joining us to discuss the Syrian Civil War is Fabrice Balanche, a geographer and specialist in geopolitics of the Middle East who has taught in France. He is the author of several books on Middle Eastern geography and the Syrian Civil War. He was also affiliated with the think tank Washington Institute for Near East Policy and the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. Dr. Balanche, welcome to Talking History.
Thank you.
So I'd like to begin with a kind of basic question for our listeners who are probably aware of the Syrian Civil War. It's been on the news on and off for more than a decade. But, I think at this moment in time, people forget what the origins of this civil war. So could you outline some of the factors that led to the protests against Bashar al-Assad in Syria in 2011? Why was there a popular uprising in Syria specifically?
Well, in Syria, it was like in Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen. First, you had fed up about the dictator, and you have economic reason, of course, unemployment, financial crisis, who put the people in the streets. But what you have specific in Syria, different from Egypt or Tunisia, it's the sectarian problem. Bashar al-Assad belonged to a minority that's called the Alawite. It's 10% of the population. This minority control the power, control the state, control the army in Syria since 1970, since Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, took the power. And the majority of the population, which is Arab Sunni, we have the Sunni population, it's about 80% of the population, but it's divided between Arabs, 75%, Kurds, 10-12%, and you have Turkmen, Sunni also 3%. So the minority as the Alawite, who concentrate the political power and the power in the army, are the Praetorian Guard of Bashar al-Assad. And you had the uprising came from the poor Arab Sunni suburb, from the poor countryside of Syria. It was a consequence of not the regime change, the economic change in Syria from socialist system to liberalization. What does it mean? At the time, until 2000, when Assad took the power, Syria was in what we call the de-regist economy, protected economy. And it was not sustainable, like the Soviet Union was not sustainable. So Assad decided to change the system of economy for more liberalization. So he destroyed the social security network, he destroyed the public services, and he created a lot of unemployment because the private sector was unable to give jobs to this large amount of young people who came to the market, and so he created a huge frustration in the population. Because you have to understand that in Syria, the fertility rate until 2005 was 6 children per woman. What does it mean? Syria had the demography of Mali, had the demography of Sub-Africa, and not the demography of Egypt. It was 3 children. So the population of Syria doubled each 20 years since 1945. So this demography broke any effort to develop the country. And if at the same time you have a liberalization of the economy, you have a sectarian problem, it's a bomb will explode.
The protest movements in the region initially met with some success, resulting in the overthrow of Egypt's Hosni Mubarak and Tunisia's Ben Ali. What did the Syrian protest movement fail where others had succeeded?
The protest movement fell because of the sectarianisms. In the Syrian army, the backbone of the Syrian army were the Alawite. The majority of the officers were Alawite. The Republican Guard, the elite force, 30,000 guys, all Alawite. All the military aviation were Alawite. So the Syrian army stay loyal to the power. You had many defectors. The Syrian army was 300,000 people. After 1-2 years, it was just 150,000 soldiers. 150,000 left the army, joined the opposition, or moved to Turkey, to Lebanon, to escape to the war. But the backbone of the Syrian army was never destroyed like in Libya. If you remember, when you have a division of the Libyan army, the Libyan aviation, the pilot took the plane and moved to Malta, moved to Tunisia because he didn't want to bomb the population. In Syria, it was not the case, because for the Alawites, it was an existential war. They know that if the regime loses the war, they are going to be killed. They will not have any mercy from the Sunni side. So they had to fight until the victory. They have no choice. And because in front of this unified army, you had a huge division in the Syrian opposition. It could not work. You never had a real free Syrian army. It was just a dream. You had thousands of militian groups unable to work together. And when Saudi Arabia and Qatar decided to support the Syrian opposition, it was worst, because Qatar pay one group, Saudi pay another group, and the opposition start to fight each other to attract the money from Qatar and from Saudi. And after, when you had the jihadists who came to Syria, and they came very quickly in Syria. Since July 2011, Al-Qaeda came from Iraq to Syria and started to be the major movement inside the Syrian opposition. And so for the West, it was much more difficult to support the Syrian opposition when you know that it's Al-Qaeda who control a large part of this opposition. And that's why in August 2013, after the chemical attacks in the Ghouta, we wanted to bomb, Bashar al-Assad wanted to bomb Syria. It was a red line to use chemical weapon. And Obama hesitated, because if we bomb Damascus and if we weaken the Syrian army, who will take the power in Damascus? A moderate Syrian opposition, which not exist, or the jihadists? And so we have reduced the support to the Syrian opposition. And in 2015, Russia came directly to Syria and supported the regime, and it was over for the Syrian opposition.
So, although the Syrian Civil War was caused by many of the same factors that caused the uprisings in Tunisia, the uprisings in Egypt, the specificities of Syrian society meant that it played out differently. In places like Tunisia and Egypt, the population is more homogeneous.
Yes.
It's Sunni dominated. Whereas in Syria, we have these different sectarian groups, and you have a minority group in charge of the country dominating the elite military institutions. Yes. And this group had no reason to wish to compromise, because rather than becoming a kind of general uprising against a dictatorial regime, very quickly the protests turned into a sectarian conflict that
that's true.
Pitted Sunnis, the majority, against the Alawite ruling minority. So, what I kind of want to follow up then on that question is, when we look at the Syrian Civil War, one of the things you're indicating is that the opposition itself became extremely fragmented early on, with all these many different militias, with different foreign powers supporting different groups, and sometimes, as you pointed out, Qatar supporting one group, Saudi supporting another, and those groups fighting with each other. Because of this, I think it's quite difficult for people to kind of understand what was going on in the Syrian Civil War, because we seem to have many, many different factions. In 2013, Obama was about to bomb the Syrian regime. But if we go a little bit further forward in time, Obama did launch a military operation in Syria against ISIS, but ISIS was opposed to the Syrian government as well.
Yes.
So can you just outline for us, after the initial wave of the uprising, who are the main factions in this Syrian civil war? Who are the main opposition factions that the government is fighting against?
Alors, first, in Syria, if we take the year 2012, after 1 year of the uprising, you had the political opposition, but this, what we call the Syrian National Coalition. But this Syrian National Coalition was mostly outside Syria. And they had, this political opposition had nearly no link with the opposition inside Syria. And especially they had no link, no relation with the military opposition. Because the military opposition, it was people from the suburbs, from the countryside, poor people, not well educated, former military. And the political opposition, it was well-educated people from the bourgeoisie, from the city. So you had a kind of class conflict between the both. And the military opposition didn't want to give any legitimacy to this Sheraton coalition because they were always in meeting in Sheraton hotel. And the political opposition has not a lot of sympathy for these poor people that they take weapons. So the first division was between the political and the military. Inside the military opposition, you have what one can call the secular opposition, the Free Syrian Army, Jaish al-Hor in Arabic. But this Free Syrian Army, it was thousands of different groups with no link together. After, you had what we call the moderate Islamist groups, Harar al-Sham, Sukur al-Sham, not jihadists. Don't want to target the West. They were no link with Al-Qaeda, but they were Islamist people. They want to impose Sharia. They want to kill the Alawite, to expel the Christian. So not very nice people according to Western parameters. And after, you had, of course, the jihadists. The jihadists, it was, at the beginning, Jabhat al-Nusra, Nusra Front, came from Iraq, a branch of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, where you had Mr. al-Jolani and Mr. al-Baghdadi. Jolani Syrian, Baghdadi Iraqian. And after 1 year, in 2013, we had a split between the both branch. Baghdadi wanted to rule the movement, and Jolani was not didn't agree to let the power to al-Baghdadi. So they asked a judgment from Ayman al-Zawahiri, the chief of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. So we have seen that there is a clear link between Jabhat al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda. Until that time, they denied to be with Al-Qaeda. And we have this split between Jabhat al-Nusra and Daesh, ISIS. This is the three main category what we can have in the military opposition.
As if the multiple coalitions and factions are not confusing enough, there are currently U.S., Russian, Iranian, and Turkish forces stationed in Syria. Could you explain how and why these powers have come to be involved in this war?
Yes, now take the situation today in Syria. We have American troops still in eastern Syria, about 1,000 people with few French special forces too, even if France don't recognize that we have still soldiers. We have the Turks on the north, in Idlib and northern Aleppo. We have the Iranian in the whole regime area, with base in Damascus, base close to the Golan, base in Latakia, base in Deir ez-Zor in eastern part of Syria. And we have the Russian in Latakia, close to the coast, in Damascus, and also in eastern part of Syria. So the American came in directly in 2014 when Obama decided to create this international coalition against ISIS. And so he sent troops to Syria, not to fight, but to support the Kurdish Peshmerga, who were very much involved against ISIS. And since 2014, these soldiers are still in Syria. In September 2015, Mr. Putin decided to send troops in Syria, not to fight also, to support the Syrian army with artillery, with aviation, and which he gave a clear advantage to the Syrian army against the rebels who didn't have any manpads, any artillery. So that's why they win the war. The Iranians are in Syria nearly since always, but of course much more involved in 2012, 2013. You have Pasdaran, you have Al-Quds, few thousand people, but mostly it's Hezbollah. 10,000 fighters from Hezbollah are in Syria. And you have also about 40,000 Shia militia coming from Iraq. All are Iranian proxies. And the Turks in the north, because the Turks want to create a security belt that they call a security belt, but it's more an anti-Kurdish Arab belt, because they are making ethnic cleansing against the Kurds in the north of Syria. And they have about 10,000 soldiers in the north. And this situation show that Syria, I told that Syria, it's the epicenter of the new arc of crisis between what we can call the Western country and the Eurasian alliance, because it's the only country in the world where you have this confrontation. It's not exactly a confrontation, but presence of US troops, Russian troops, Iranian troops, and it could create a conflict, international conflict.
So, this conflict has been going on for over a decade, and it seems to have kind of stabilized into a stalemate, but it still doesn't seem that there's any kind of long-term end in sight. Could you give us a little bit of an idea of, where everything stands in the conflict today? Mm-hmm. The regime seems to have survived, but it still doesn't control large parts of the country. There are foreign forces, as you just noted, across the country. So what are the prospects for an end to this conflict, or some kind of agreement that can lead to a certain degree of normalization in Syria? And to what extent is this conflict going to be sustained by continued foreign involvement?
Mm-hmm. The Syrian conflicts since 2020, it's a frozen conflict. We don't have large offensive as before, battle for Aleppo, a lot of violence. Today, the number of people killed it's few hundred people per year. Before it was 100,000, 200,000. So it's kind of frozen conflict. Very dependent on the international situation. The last big operation was in since February 22. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Russians are not interested anymore to support strongly Assad regime. That does not mean that they withdraw from Syria, but the interest it's Ukraine. So, because the interest is Ukraine, they need to have good relation with Turkey. So, we prevent Assad to attack the northwest of Syria, where are the Turkish proxies and the Turkish troops, and just to have good relation in Turkey, because they want the neutrality of Turkey in the Ukrainian war. And so the Syrian conflict is very dependent about this international relation. That's why it is frozen. If after 6 months the war in Ukraine stop or become a frozen conflict too, I'm sure that we will see a new Russian offensive in Syria, like we have seen that after 2014, after the annexation of Crimea. On the US side, on the Western side, there is no appetite to change the regime. There is no appetite to invest more in Syria, just to keep some troops in eastern Syria, to prevent the Iranian or the Russian to take the Kurdish area, but no more. And especially this year, because in US it's the 2024 is the election. And we know that usually the year of the election, US is weak abroad, don't want to take any initiative abroad. But in Syria, the roots of the conflict are still present. The regime controls 2/3 of the territory and the resident population. You have 8 million of people outside. It's sure that they will never allow to come back. You have still 4 million of people in northwest Syria, in a place that I call the new Gaza Strip, because we have a concentration of IDPs, of refugees in this area under the control of the terrorist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the former al-Nusra Front, the former branch of Al-Qaeda in Syria. You have still Daesh present in eastern Syria. I was in the area last year. I did many interviews with Arab people. They told me, it was so better at the time of Daesh. Imagine, it was so better at the time of Daesh. They have a very big nostalgia about Daesh time, because they hate the Kurds, because they are in so bad economic situation. There is so huge frustration that they remember that at the time of Daesh, at least at the beginning, the situation, economic situation was better, and also because the people supported Daesh. It's something that they deny today, but why they supported Daesh? Because Daesh didn't impose the Sharia, the Islamic law in eastern Syria, because people lived already under the Islamic law, under the Sharia. Because it's a very conservative area, and Daesh was not strange for them, by the contrary. And so we have to keep that in mind. And Daesh is still present, is still a threat. So I don't see any agreement, peace process in Syria soon, especially because we are in a world confrontation between the Eurasian axis and the Western country, and Syria is on the front line.
Thank you for joining us for Talking History, a presentation of KSMU and the Missouri State University History Department. Catch us every first Thursday at 12:06 after NPR News, and find this episode and our entire back catalog at ksmu.org or wherever podcasts are found.